let's talk about what happened in Texas, not the redistricting stuff, but Texas recently passed a law to put the 10 Commandments in public schools. And I've made so many videos about this type of law and this specific law. I'm not going to rehash everything, but I do want to tell you a couple things. And then I want to tell you what a judge said about it this week. Okay. But basically, earlier this year, Texas passed a law to put the 10 Commandments in every public school classroom. They called it Senate Bill 10. Of course they did. Haha. 10 Commandments. But basically, the law said every classroom needs a durable 16-inch by 20-inch poster of the 10 Commandments. It could be privately donated, or the school can use its own funds to get it. But by and large, it's not a financial thing. Everyone would be able to get these posters, or Christians would just donate the ones to everybody. And the law said this is what every poster has to state, word for word. They spelled out the commandments as they want. And it was the King James version of the commandments. The law also said if any school district gets sued over this, the Attorney General of Texas will defend you for free, or the taxpayers would pay for that. And this hasn't always worked. 2 years ago, they tried to pass this bill. It did not pass. It didn't even make it to a final vote in the state house. But this year, the Texas legislature passed it. They ignored a letter sent to them by 150 Christian and Jewish leaders who said this bill, quote, undermines the faith and freedom we cherish. They don't care because those aren't the real type of Christians and Jews, right? So they passed that bill. Now, what else do you need to know? Louisiana passed a version of this bill too. A federal judge said it's unconstitutional. Louisiana appealed it. And an appellate court just said, what are you doing? Whatever that first judge said is correct. It's still illegal. And that's the Fifth Circuit that said that. Arkansas passed a version of this bill last month. They just got sued over it. And I believe, I can't remember this anymore. Maybe a judge has struck that down. I can't remember, but they've already been sued over it. But Texas is like the most influential state to do this, and they passed it, and they were also sued over this. Now, who did the lawsuit? Americans United for Separation of Church and State, the ACLU of Texas, the ACLU National, the Freedom from Religion Foundation. These are the same groups that filed the lawsuits in Arkansas and Louisiana. They know what they're doing. And in the case of Texas, they said we are suing on behalf of 16 different families who run the gamut of religious beliefs. Some of them are Christians, some of them are Jews, Muslims, they have atheists in there, and they all say that if my child is exposed to this version of the 10 Commandments, you are violating my religious freedom, basically, is what they said in the lawsuit. They sued the individual school districts. They did not sue the state of Texas, which is the same method they did in Louisiana and Arkansas. Oh, in Arkansas, I should say, a judge did rule on that. And the judge said, I am temporarily saying the 10 Commandments cannot go up in the school districts that have been sued. But that was a preliminary injunction. We're waiting for the final decision on that. And so in Texas, that's what they said. School starts in September. And in Texas, they said, we need a response before like September 1st, I think, because that's when the law goes into effect. And so they needed a judge to rule on it pretty quickly because they need to know, the schools need to know what they should do about this by September 1st. Okay, so that's where we were at. I'm skipping over a bunch of things, but that's the idea. So the other thing I got to tell you is this lawsuit filed by the Church-State Separation Group, what they said is the argument they've been making in these other states too. They said, look, there was a law passed in Kentucky decades ago, and the Supreme Court said, let's put the 10 Commandments up in public spaces. It was called Stone versus Graham. And the Supreme Court said, you can't do that. It's totally endorsing religion. So that's unconstitutional. And what this lawsuit in Texas said is that ruling is still in effect. The Supreme Court has not overturned that decision. So based on Stone versus Graham, the Texas law is also unconstitutional. They also said, hey, Louisiana passed a law just like this, and the Fifth Circuit Appeals Court already said it's illegal. It's unconstitutional. And guess what? Texas is under the umbrella of the Fifth Circuit. So we've already had this decision. So just apply what that Fifth Circuit decision said to Texas. So that's what their argument was. They were saying if the 10 Commandments is everywhere, the state is telling kids what religion counts and which ones don't. And they're sending a message that if you're not from the right type of Christian family, you're a second-class citizen. Okay? And they said you're violating our First Amendment rights, our establishment right, the First Amendment's establishment clause, their free exercise rights. But they were asking, hey, weigh in before September 1st so these school districts know what to do. And that is what Judge Fred Biery did this week. And if you're not familiar with this guy, I figured I would show you this first because in 2013, Fred Biery released one of the best opinions in a case that is totally unrelated to this that you will ever read. And I need to show you this because it's glorious. Look at the date. It's 2013. And this is about like a topless bar or something in San Antonio. I don't even know the details, but watch how much fun the judge has with his ruling. An ordinance dealing with semi-nude dancers has once again fallen on the court's lap. The city of San Antonio wants exotic dancers employed by the plaintiffs to wear larger pieces of fabric to cover more of the female breast. Thus, the age-old question before the court, now with constitutional implications, is, does size matter? This guy does this the entire decision. He loves his jokes. He loves having fun with the material in front of him. And I only say that to you because I will tell you, when I heard about what this judge said in the Ten Commandments case, my first thought is, okay, spoiler, he said it's unconstitutional. And that's what I saw in the press releases from all those church-state separation groups. But then I started reading the ruling, and I swear to you, I spent so much time reading it. And I'm not a lawyer, but it was so much fun to read. Because you could tell this is a man who clearly decided this case like forever ago. But you know, he just sat there for a while like, how can I have fun with the writing of this ruling? So let me show you some of this decision here. So after we get through the cover page and all the boring stuff, we get to the meat. In the beginning. And you see the number 1 footnote there. If we scroll to the bottom, Genesis 1:1. You know he's writing this for the Christians who are going to be super mad at what he decides. But if I go down to some of this, one of the things that gets really fun is, where did this go? Here we go. First, he just starts off by saying, what if we were not talking about Christianity, but we were talking about a different religion? Imagine the consternation and legal firestorm were the following fictional story to become reality. And now he just makes shit up. Hamtramck, Michigan. Being a majority Muslim community, the city council and school board have decreed that beginning September 1st, 2025, the following teachings of the Quran from these chapters and verses shall be posted in all public buildings and public schools. And basically what he is citing are actual verses from the Quran that are basically their versions of the 10 Commandments. Like, look at the second paragraph. For your Lord has decreed that you worship none but him. Right? That's the first commandment. And honor your parents. If one or both of them reach old age in your care, never yell at them, rather address them respectfully. So yeah, obey thy mother and father. It's the 10 Commandments, but it's the Islamic version of it. And he says, while we the people rule by a majority, the Bill of Rights protects the minority Christians in Hamtramck, in the city, which I'm told by commenters is a real place that I don't know how to pronounce, and those 33% of Texans who do not adhere to any of the Christian denominations. So already he's like, you guys, if this were a majority Muslim community that wanted to do this, all of you know exactly what your reaction would be. You would flip the hell out over it. So what the hell are we doing here? So already I like this judge. Then he continues, part 2. Eternity is a long time. Diversity of Homo sapiens' religious and life after death beliefs. He's now going to take us on a journey through the history of humanity and religion. Oh my God. What is this man do? You could have issued this ruling on a note card 2 weeks ago. But Fred Biery was sitting at home for like the past week, like prosing this up. Let us keep reading. Though most of the 8 billion Homo sapiens have no knowledge they are traveling 66,000 miles per hour around the sun, they have evolved over several million years, another knock on conservative Christians, to be the only species which knows it will die. He goes on to say, oh, thank you. Hamtramck. Thank you. And now I'm done saying that city's name. He goes on to say, in the past 10,000 years of human societal development. Oh, I'm sorry. No, let me back up. It was better before. Not wanting their existence to end, Homo sapiens developed a multitude of theories and hopes encompassed in thousands of religions of how they can avoid returning to the earth from whence they and other species came. Or, as the country western song says, he's now quoting, who is it? Kenny Chesney? He is quoting, look at that footnote right there, Kenny Chesney. Or as the country western song says, everybody want to go to heaven, but nobody want to go now. In the past 10,000 years of human societal development, those belief systems have included the multiple gods of this civilization and this one. And there's another religion and a whole bunch of other religions, to name a few. And he basically says there's a lot of religions out there. And by the way, he even says, on the other hand, some Homo sapiens, known as atheists, believe they know the only truth, that there is nothingness after physical death. So thanks, he's including us as well. Then we get to a section called Grace and Torture. I don't even know what this case is about anymore. This dude is just riffing at this point, because he just has a lot to say, but he doesn't have a Substack. He's just like, all right, well, I got a legal decision I could write. Let me throw in my drafts from my book. I like this. While religious institutions bestow many blessings and try to alleviate suffering, those acts of grace are neutralized by religious Homo sapiens who exhibit an historical and continuing pernicious and pervasive tendency to kill other humans and confiscate the property of those, sometimes even within the same religion, who do not believe as they do. This man goes on for a while, and then he summarizes where we are at now with a reference to Sonny and Cher. That violent history gives rise to the question, haven't we evolved? Other than size and longevity, the answer clearly is, of course not. The beat goes on. Thanks for that reference. Okay, I will skip ahead. I'm not going to read the entire thing here, but then we get into the American colonial religious experience where he talks about what is religion like in America before it was founded as a country, where he talks about Christians persecuted other Christians. And you know what? He even says bad things happen when a government run by one group of people and religion join hand in hand. And to make that point, he actually includes a picture that I must show you. If I scroll down here we go. Government and religion holding hands. One picture from the modern era speaks silently and poignantly on the danger of majoritarian government and religion holding hands. Let me zoom in on this picture. Oh my God. He's just clip arting these pictures in here. That, by the way, is Hitler greeting Reich Bishop Ludwig Müller and Abbot somebody as honorary guests at a Reich Party rally for unity and strength in 1934. His point is, when the government and religion go hand in hand, bad things can happen. And listen, if you are a Texas lawmaker and you are reading through this and you're already pissed off at this judge, he knows it. And he's like, let me see how much further I can go. You want a picture of Hitler? I got a picture of Hitler for you. Then he brings up conflicts in Israel and Iran. And he just says, when you have government and religion mixing, a lot of people are left out entirely, or they are pressured to abandon their religious beliefs in order to profess the one you want. And as we are going through all this, and he is saying all this, I'll just show you. The debate continues through American history. We are on page 12 of 55. This dude has given us all the chapters of the book he's clearly working on, and we're on page 12 of his 10 Commandments ruling. He hasn't even gotten to the stuff we are actually talking about yet. Can you see why I had so much fun reading this ruling and totally ignoring the press release put out by the church-state separation groups? So eventually, the judge gets around to making the very obvious point that the United States, ever since we were founded, has respected church-state separation. Our tradition backs that up. Our history backs that up. And importantly, legal precedent backs that up. So eventually, he says, this boils down to two real questions. Okay? And let me see if I can pull them up for you here. After he goes through all of this, he says there are two things we basically got to answer. And I don't even know which page I have to go to. Here we go. I have to jump to page 21 to find the questions we care about. The current case. Now we get to the stuff everyone's actually wondering about. The current case. The court finds the issues before it can be distilled as follows: exposure versus coercion. And what he means by that is the Texas lawmakers say, we're not trying to indoctrinate you with the 10 Commandments. We just want kids exposed to it so they can understand our country was founded on these principles. We just want to expose them to it. Whereas the church-state separation side says, you're trying to convert them into Christianity. There's a coercive element here. This is the right religion, and you should believe this. And the judge is saying, yeah, I got to figure out, is this about exposure or is it about coercion? And the second thing we got to figure out, and he uses legalese to explain this, is, remember I said the Fifth Circuit already declared the Louisiana 10 Commandments law unconstitutional? Question 2 is, does this court have to follow what the Fifth Circuit said, or is the Texas law so different that what the Fifth Circuit said does not apply here? So those are the two things he has to answer, but not without some art. Not without some clip art. You guys look, it's Charlton Heston and Cecil B. DeMille and some Rembrandt picture painting. Okay, dude's just riffing again. I'm going to skip over that. So when it comes to coercion, here's what I appreciate that this judge did after you get past the pictures. He actually went through all of the plaintiffs in this case. And it starts... He explains what the law is, and we talk about what's going on with these things. But look at this. Starting on page, where are we here? 28. He goes through all these families, and he starts explaining. Look at this. Plaintiff Mara Nathan is Jewish, and we talk about her religious beliefs and why she says she doesn't want the 10 Commandments in her kids' schools. She says the text, the KJV 10 Commandments, it's not found in any Jewish tradition. By directing, I am the Lord thy God, the first commandment conflicts with the family's Jewish belief. The displays mandated by SB 10 conflict with Jewish teachings that oppose proselytizing. Then he goes to the next plaintiff. Here's what their problems are with it. He does this page after page, just running through all 16 plaintiffs' families, what their stories are, and why they have a problem with the 10 Commandments. And just to tell you a couple things, I told you about what that Jewish family said. There's another group of people who say that the 10 Commandments will impose one set of religious values and beliefs on their kid over their family's values. Another family says the text of the 10 Commandments, the KJV version, treats some people as property and includes patriarchal and gendered language, which conflicts with their Baptist beliefs. And so it goes on like this for a while. All of these plaintiffs, he says, basically have these strong faith-based or secular-based reasons for not wanting their kids taught that the 10 Commandments they will see in their classrooms are some sort of universal truth. So he says, ultimately, this is clearly coercive. You want these kids to believe this version of the 10 Commandments, the KJV version, is the right version. And this is no longer about exposure. This is about coercion. Now, what about the Fifth Circuit ruling? He basically goes into depth and says, well, it depends on whether the Texas law resembles the Louisiana law enough, right? And so what he says, I won't show you it in the thing anymore, but he says, look, the Texas posters, they're actually larger than the ones in Louisiana. This is interesting. In Louisiana, the law said there has to be a disclaimer underneath the posters saying this has historical relevance. It's not about pushing religion on you. Well, guess what? In Texas, they do not need a disclaimer on the posters. And so for those reasons and a couple of other technical ones, the judge says if the Louisiana law was declared unconstitutional and the Fifth Circuit said you can't do that, well, then the Texas law is way more extreme, even though it's doing the same thing. So the Fifth Circuit ruling applies to us as well. So he's like, I can't even do anything about it if I wanted to. If you appeal this, it's going to go right back to the Fifth Circuit, and they've already said it's unconstitutional. So I have to tell you that. So that's interesting as well. There was one other aspect of this judge's decision I absolutely loved, even though I've already told you kind of the big part about this. The judge said that the two sides in Texas both had expert witnesses. The church-state separation side had a Dr. Stephen Green, who is a religious studies lawyer, I believe, a professor of law. And he explained to the court that the founding fathers supported church-state separation and that our founding documents, like the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, were not based on the Ten Commandments, and that there is no long-standing historical practice of putting the Ten Commandments in public schools. I mean, at the start of our nation, we did not have public schools. If we had any schools, they were like religious schools, but then we moved away from that historically. So like and even in those religious schools, they didn't really put up the Ten Commandments. So that was what the church-state separation expert had to say. The Texas side brought in their own guy, Dr. Mark David Hall, who is a professor of law at Pat Robertson's Regent University, and he has repeatedly downplayed the existence of Christian nationalism. And after the judge heard from both guys, here's the polite way he put this. The court heard from and is very appreciative of the testimony of Dr. Stephen Green and Dr. Mark Hall, which was an extensive augmentation of the court's 20 years of Methodist Sunday school and theology, political philosophy, and constitutional history courses at Texas Lutheran University. He's giving himself a shout out. But then the judge says, the court finds Dr. Green's opinions concerning the intent of the fathers regarding the First Amendment to be more persuasive than Dr. Hall's testimony. Of all the places the judge could have been like, this guy's an idiot, he actually played it cool here and said, yeah, the church state guy's way smarter than the other guy. I love that. Like low key slamming the dude. Imagine being told by a federal judge, you did a shitty job of arguing the one thing you're supposed to be an expert at. And so now we get to near the end of this case, the end of this decision. I'm now on page 53. But look at this. The judge writes, even if the schools, the government schools, were to meet their burden of showing a compelling interest, it would fail. Okay, I'm skipping over that stuff. This is interesting. There are ways in which students could be taught any relevant history of the Ten Commandments without the state selecting an official version of scripture, approving it in state law, and then displaying it in every classroom on a permanent basis, right? You don't have to, if you want to teach the kids about the Ten Commandments, nothing's stopping you from doing that at all. And he ultimately says here, in sum, the court finds, number one, children can be cruel to their classmates perceived to be the other. That's why he gave us the history of religion and mankind. If you're part of the outside group and you're not in the majority religion, people can be assholes. And he's like, we don't want to exacerbate that. Number two, the testimony of Dr. Green is more persuasive because that guy from Pat Robertson's school was a dumbass. Number three, SB 10 crosses the line from exposure to coercion, which is one of the things you definitely cannot do. And number four, the Fifth Circuit's ruling is binding on this court. And therefore, like, to hell with your stupid law. It's illegal. Now, what the judge said is that this only applies because you guys needed a quick decision. So after I gave you the text of the novel I'm working on, this only applies to the school districts those kids in the lawsuit are attending. Now, what do the rest of the school districts in Texas have to do? Right now, we don't know. Again, September 1st, the law goes into effect. Right now, we don't know what those other schools are supposed to do. Are they going to put up 10 Commandments posters because they were not part of this lawsuit? Or what? Maybe a decision will come down before then. But for now, this ruling only applies to the school districts in the lawsuit. But you knew this judge wasn't going to close this without saying something fun. So even though the 10 Commandments would not be affirmatively taught, the captive audience of students would have questions, which teachers would feel compelled to answer. That is what they do. Teenage boys, being the curious, hormonally driven creatures they are, weirdly sexist, but okay, might ask, Mrs. Walker, I know about lying, and I love my parents, but how do I do adultery? Truly, an awkward moment for overworked and underpaid educators who already have to deal with sex education issues. And a classic example of the law of unintended consequences in legislative edicts. Notwithstanding the sausage making process of legislation, blah, blah, blah. Listen, there are things you could do, he says. If you want to avoid a lawsuit here, there are so many ways you could have not been sued over this. Look at what he says here. You could have posted multiple versions of lessons of behavior from many cultures, melded into the American motto of E pluribus unum, a concept currently in decline, in case you were wondering what the judge thought about our original unofficial motto. For example, the 5 moral precepts of Buddhism: abstain from killing, stealing, engaging in sexual misconduct, lying, and intoxicants. You could have put that on the walls, but you didn't. Or, what else does he say? You could have said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Be kind, be respectful. The golden rule. You could have put that on the walls. Or number 3, he says, all I really needed to know, I learned in kindergarten, which is a poster I had in my classrooms when I was growing up. And he describes what that poster says, because it's just good principles. Why didn't you put that up? You could have done that, gotten across the same message as the 10 Commandments, but you would not have faced a lawsuit. And then he says, all right, here's what I'm deciding, blah, blah, blah. And then it is so ordered. And then he closes this whole thing with this. For those who disagree with the court's decision and who would do so with threats, vulgarities, and violence, a grace and peace unto you. May humankind of all faiths, beliefs, and non-beliefs be reconciled one to another. Amen. He closed the decision with amen. Because, again, he was just twisting it into the backs. Twisting that knife into the backs of conservatives. By the way, if he just put that last line, may humankind of all faiths, beliefs, and non-beliefs be reconciled one to another, you could put that on the wall too. So, where are we at after all this? The 10 Commandments proponents are now 0 for 3 in trying to force their religion into public schools. There will no doubt be more states trying this and more legal appeals. But right now, every judge who has seen these cases has knocked them down because existing legal precedent says you can't have that. And by the way, all of the judges have made very clear, because they're all talking to like Neil Gorsuch, and they're all saying there is no history or tradition of putting the 10 Commandments in public schools. So not only is it religious, there's nothing traditional about it. So, hey, Supreme Court, eventually, when this comes across your lap, you're not allowed to say there's tradition here, because there isn't. And every single one of us is saying the exact same thing about that. Like, it's a direct pitch to the Supreme Court. Don't waste your time with this shit. We've already figured this out. You don't need to do anything with it. So, like I said, it was fun to see all the church-state separation groups saying, hey, we won the case in Texas. But really, the joy was reading what this judge wrote. All right, I'm going to stop there. What do we got? Questions here before I move on. Remind us all, what is the name of this magical judge? His name, I will show you once more, is Fred Biery. He is a Clinton appointed judge. The man is older. He's an older dude, but man, he's fun to read. What else we got here? I'm going to cite this opinion in my next brief. Robin, I don't even know what your next brief is about, but please do it. And apparently just toss in excerpts from whatever novel you're working on, because that's a thing you can do. I would love to see a TikTok challenge where students ask their teachers what adultery means. No, they don't get paid enough for that shit. Let the students ask the questions and then end the reel, end the TikTok. We're done.